Emma, let's carry on the conversation which we'd started, talking about mentoring. And if I go back and just explore with you, and you told me earlier on that you had a girl. Is that the only child that you've got?
I've got two girls.
You've got two girls?
Yeah, so one's 19, one's 14.
So you've got a girly household?
A very girly household, yes. My
So
poor husband.
How does your husband cope with that?
Well, with going out and playing sport and going to the gym as much as possible, I think. Bless him.
Does he?
That's how he keeps his head straight. Yeah, 'cause he's in social work as well.
Oh, is he?
So
Okay.
heavy job on top of a hormonal household, yes.
Okay, so he must feel sometimes, I'm like in the minority and isolated or outvoted.
Yes, even our cats are female. We got a male dog, but we got a cockapoo. So he says he's pretty much female. So he feels like he's very outnumbered, bless him.
Okay, but the fact is that he must have a very, very empathic outlook in terms of what he does, being a social worker anyway.
Yes, he does. He's a very understanding person, and he works with teenagers. So he works with teenage girls as well as teenage boys. Sure. And part of his role is befriending and supporting them through challenges that they might be facing, or doing a life storybook, for example. Why are they in care? What's happened to bring them to where they are now? So it's quite a difficult job. It can be emotionally draining for him. Whereas I deal with figures. It's a lot. He says it's a lot more straightforward, but in some ways it's not. A lot of the time I do end up feeling like I'm a therapist as much as an accountant, because people tend to open up to you in that space, especially when they're seeing me regularly for accountability meetings, and sometimes feel like they can't take those things home for their wives, etc., and they want to have a conversation.
But also, I think, and I don't know whether it's just my generation, and I don't want to accuse men in general or make a pejorative statement and not really have any evidence to give it to. Most men are very, very private in the sense that they don't share what's going on.
Yeah, and a lot of my clients, it's just that they don't want to worry their partner either.
If your firm, if your business is in trouble,
yes,
the last thing you want to do is to go home to your wife and say, we're in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And I do encourage them to open up, but also they know it's a safe space. They know that they can come and have that conversation or talk through worries. One of my clients recently said to me, bless him, he said, I used to think that going to the accountant was like going to the dentist. You know, you dreaded it. You felt like your teeth were going to be pulled out. He says, I always come out of here feeling much lighter than when I went in, and happy for it. So I think that's a compliment. I thought that was quite meaningful.
I think it's huge. I think it's transformed what was the subject of jokes, of people taking the mickey out of people. And we started this process by Ethan, who was the technician, asking me, could I tell him a joke? And the joke always used to be, what do accountants use as a contraceptive?
Right.
And the answer was their personality. Now that was the usual prejudicial view as to how people viewed accountants.
Oh, and there's definitely accountants out there like that. You know, you can picture exactly what people meant by that. A man in a suit who spoke to them in terms they couldn't understand, and they came out feeling utterly confused and just knowing what their tax bill was and what they owed their accountant. It's a very with us, it's a very different experience to that, because we like our clients to actually be educated about their tax bill. So it's not a surprise for a start. They've had options to take, legal ways to minimise their tax if that's what they want to do.
Can I just ask you, do you as a business document what it is that you've done to tell that story?
Yes, so we do. We have an internal CRM system where there's notes kept about everybody. But part of that is also our internal hit by a bus policy. So if I walk out of here, get hit by a bus, I'm not back in the office. It's really important that the team has the same knowledge about somebody and can step in and support them during a period of time I might not be available. And I suppose when that particularly came into play was 3 years ago when Dad had a triple heart bypass. So he was in and out of hospital for 2 years. and hospital stints for 3 months at a time because he had quite significant complications. And during that time, obviously, Jamie and I are running a business, but we're also supporting our mum, who is staying in a hotel near the hospital with emotional support, but also our own emotions, each other's emotions, and visits to the hospital because he was in Plymouth. So obviously a bit of a trek down every time. And trying to manage all of that, we are really, really lucky that we have a fantastic team of people and 4 client managers who are very supportive of us and stepped in and really did take the reins. But they have that information there and accessible to make them able to do that, and empowerment from us to know that they're allowed to do that as well.
I love the idea that you call it "if I was hit by a bus."
Yes. Well, we talk to our clients about it a lot. What's your hit by the bus policy? What does happen? How does your business continue to run? How does your family access the income from the business? It's a really important thing that if something does happen, and worst case scenario, actually, in a lot of people's plans is not death. That's not the worst case scenario because there's income there for that. If they end up in intensive care for a period of time, for example, they're going to come back to that business at some point in time, hopefully. How does it continue in the meantime? It's a conversation we have with all of our directors. And
it's really in the era that we now live in, whenever I see there's been a tragedy of any sort, and sometimes involving a whole bunch of people, I just look at them and think to their families and think what's actually happened. And basically, whatever they were dependent upon, the systems and whatever they did suddenly finish and stop. Yeah. And income or access to income is usually one of their biggest difficulties at all.
Exactly. And it's so important. You want your family in that scenario to be able to prioritise you, not to be worried about the house being repossessed, because, a lot of the times the businesses that we're helping, they are the main income. And it could be that husband and wife both work in the business. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you've got multiple families reliant on a business. And what happens if a key person is out of that business for a period of months? There needs to be a plan. There needs to be authorisations in place. And we do a lot of education around things like business power of attorneys. So people have something in place. And it's not often something that accountants get involved in, is actually talking about the bigger picture. But it is really important.
It's quite interesting, actually, because both of my kids, unfortunately for me, and I really mean unfortunately, have both left and now live in Australia. One lives in mainland Australia, the other one lives in Tasmania. And I was talking to her this morning just before I came here. So for me, that process and having power of attorney is something that I've just been through as a process.
Yeah. So that's significant. But can you imagine if when you originally had a business, say your early 20s, and you've got a 2-year-old, for example, and your wife's at home looking after the 2-year-old and all your income's coming from that business, but then something happens and you're incapacitated for 3 months, you can't do your normal business role. How does your family survive, but also cope with the emotional toil of looking after you? So having that power of attorney in place, you're never too young, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, to think about it and to have a plan in place for it. And it is something that actually we did some client testimonial stories recently, and it was independently commissioned to a local firm called Insight 6, and they're fantastic and they focus on client experience. But their researcher went out and spoke to clients independently of us. So the report has come back with, not influenced by us in the slightest. And one of the main value points that our clients see is that type of advice.
I think in the current era that we live in, it's absolutely critical.
It is. It's really important. And it's not something that gets talked about enough, but it's a basic thing. So when people on board with us, you don't want to, in the first meeting with somebody, they've come to you to talk about whether you're going to act as their accountant. You don't really want to talk about wills and power of attorneys, do you? But it is something that is part of our onboarding meeting. So within the first month of being with us, we sit down with somebody and we cover off a whole host of things. Wills and power of attorney are part of it, but adequate insurances, medical insurance, because you can't rely on the NHS wonderfully now for the whole family. Things like vehicles. Do they understand how they're running vehicles through their company? Are they taking advantage of trivial benefits? So all sorts of things get covered off in that meeting to ensure that from the outset, they're getting the best from us.
I wish we'd had that conversation a long time ago.
A lot of people say that it's I've never had an accountant speak to me like this, and I'm like, well, I believe it's quite basic things, and it's things that should be being talked about.
I agree.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. Having been through the process recently, I agree, and it's really important. It's a bit like I was having a conversation with Jenny, who is my wife, last night, and we were talking about health insurance or travel insurance specifically.
right.
And I think most people reluctantly, if they do at all, buy that and then go, well, it's not going to happen to me.
And then, of course, it does. And then you've got to cope with the fallout from that. I mean, we work very closely with a medical insurance company, and they're a not-for-profit organisation, which is fantastic because they are ploughing back into the community themselves. So they have recently helped my daughter's school have some funding for some netball equipment that they wanted. So by me encouraging my clients to take out medical insurance, I know that some of that money is being ploughed back into the community, which is fantastic. But I also know then that my clients are protected. If something happens to them, they're going to get support quickly, which in the scenario we're talking about, if you're out of the business for some reason, you want to be treated as quick as possibly and back in, don't you? And the same if it's your child, because, you know, you don't want to be making them wait for NHS waiting lists necessarily, but you can cover your children and have them looked after well as well, so for very little cost. It's not as expensive as people think it is.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have those types of conversations and to make sure that people are... It's a risk protection element. So you've got to assess your business risk, haven't you? And how your business has that sustainability. So that's really what we help them do, is to look at it all and make referrals to people that we trust. And I know we've met through Alistair from G12, and I've met a lot of people through G12 that I do now actively recommend to my clients because we've built up that trust and working relationships, and they always look after them really well.
But I think I used to use the phrase often, and it's a phrase I used to use because I used to work as well as a counsellor. And when you're doing counselling and so forth, encouraging people to hold hands, encouraging people to talk. And I think businesses need to hold hands.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there as well. And that's where we're trying to look after the whole person as well as their business. And part of what we're doing at the moment is we are supporting a local charity who help people with their mental health. We're coming up with a programme to market to accountancy firms around the country of how to support your colleagues, but also how to support your clients. So I've had scenarios where my clients have disclosed to me things about their mental health, and I felt that I needed to go and access some training, have a support system in place for what do I do in that scenario? How do I help somebody in the most effective way? Because telling people how to get a will is far more straightforward than giving somebody support with their mental challenges. So we're coming up with a programme at the moment, which we're hoping to roll out around the country to support accountancy firms, because the more there is a shift in the industry and more you are that trusted advisor, you are trusted on another level with people's mental health as well.
I think it's quite interesting as well, because tying it back together, and it all goes back, is when I go back to the conversations around Sea Change, who actually are there to give support to the community. One of the things that they're looking to do is what they're going to call advocates who go out on their behalf. And they may be businesses and so forth, having the ability to access the kind of services that they offer. And I think that they all need to be much, much better connected. And I think it's quite interesting because I live in what I think is quite a privileged community, but at the same time, it's disconnected. And it needs to be much, much better connected.
It's almost people are afraid of collaboration, and I always try and encourage my clients to collaborate with people, even within the same industry, because everyone is slightly different and everyone has a slightly different offering. And even if it's just a bit of emotional support and running something by somebody, it's useful for them to be able to do that with somebody else from the same industry who understands the challenges that they're potentially facing and can give them the right support. Yeah.
I want to share with you something which was my own personal experience, which was when I ended up ostensibly retired, or I thought I was, or I thought I'd made a decision around that. I hadn't really, because I wanted to continue working. And I realized when I continued working that working and being associated with work was a critical part of me as a person. And when I did that, I sat down and wrote a book. And the book was called The Only Behaviour You Control Is Your Own. Mm-hmm. Came from that experience. And actually what I did is I tried to put together the elements in that book. And when I was putting them together in that book, it was driven by my frustration of trying to say to people, it's not about changing other people, it's about focusing on your own behaviour. And I started this conversation with you, and you've been really good. And if you hadn't done so, I would have told you. I gave you a little mirror to look at and talk about you, not about everybody else, but talk about you. I think so often I've watched people try and deal with difficult situations thinking they're going to shout, they're going to threaten, they're going to push, they're going to cajole, and actually not realise, had they done something about their behaviour, they would have got a different result.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have self-reflection, especially in business, because let's face it, nobody's perfect. There's always room for improvement, isn't there?
But you must say that as a mum dealing with two girls as well.
Yeah, well, interestingly, I do encourage my eldest daughter to attend networking with me when she's not at university. Because I said to her, it's about widening your connections, and learning about other people and what they're doing will give her a wider perspective on the world. And she's training to be a paramedic. So, she's coming across a lot of different people in the role that she's doing.
I read about, and it just hit me as being so obvious, actually, but I read about something that actually I initiated because I used to run a big adult education centre. And one day I decided in this education centre, I read about something that had happened in America. And it was a campaign that started in America where basically they were teaching people how to do CPR and how to resuscitate people. And I actually created a program called Heart Stop.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'm a local teacher, and I remember putting out all these leaflets, inviting people to come to my adult education centre, to come to Heart Stop, believing that if I could teach people about CPR, then I could possibly save somebody's life.
That's fantastic.
And actually, on the first night that I opened, I had 100 people in this room. It was extraordinary.
That's fantastic.
And I had mannequins all over the place, and I had doctors and people coming and being part of it, so people could learn how to do CPR.
It's really important. One of my clients actually has a first aid company, but he's an ex-Marine, and he believes in making it real. So he will have an actor there and fake blood and everything to replicate the scenario as closely as possible. And part of that is his belief that you need to make it as real as possible for people to learn adequately what they're doing.
I agree with him, and I completely agree. So for example, it's all over the local newspaper, the Derbyshire Times. Local teacher says, don't go for an ambulance if somebody collapses, because I believed that if you actually were able to understand the situation, then you could do something to help them. Running off to get an ambulance, and by the time you got back, they could have died.
Yeah, no, that's true. We unfortunately, we lost our neighbour during COVID, and he needed CPR, and they were struggling next door to sustain it for enough time whilst the ambulance got there.
Yeah.
And I think both my husband and I reflected afterwards that we needed more education. I think it should really be built into what you're taught at school. It should be part of the secondary school curriculum.
Along with a course called Being a Parent.
Yeah. Budgeting.
Yeah, budgeting and being a parent.
It's all of those key life skills, isn't it, that the education system doesn't really reflect at the moment, which is a massive shame.
I used to get insurance companies, bank managers and people like that who seemed completely inaccessible to most of my kids who were about to leave school
Yeah.
in less than a year. And I used to get them to talk about what they did and what was actually happening, besides running stuff around sex education, which also is very important, but actually teaching them about insurance and about banks and how they could do that and what it was actually doing and how did it work.
Yeah, it is really, really important. And it's something that we were actually in discussions with a local school about coming in and pointing them in the right direction with things. You know, what's important. If you want to start up a business, what does that look like? It doesn't necessarily have to be a big, terrifying thing. Encourage the next generation of business owners to come through, to have their own ideas.
I would encourage you in any way possible to do that, because I think it's absolutely so critical. I mean, I've got, my brother he's got a boy who is an absolute star on YouTube.
Okay.
He earns a living on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? He completely sustains himself on YouTube by making the videos about, first of all, his travels around in a van.
Okay, yeah.
And he started out and he travelled everywhere.
I might know who you're talking about.
Really? He's called Theo. He's just split up. His story at the moment has taken a different turn.
Okay.
Because he's just split up with his partner, which is a big sadness. But at the same time, he's an absolute star on YouTube.
Yeah.
He now lives in Portugal.
And this is it, isn't there? There's so many fresh ideas. You're not confined anymore by the world like you used to be. So when I first started in accountancy, it was probably all local businesses that we acted for. Now we've got clients everywhere. A lot of them probably have originated locally in some form, which is how they know us and trust us. Right. But they're located everywhere, and they can be, because it's all cloud-based and it doesn't matter.
Sure.
And one of my clients actually does do travel writing, and a bit of a crossover there.
Sure, I was actually saying his name is Theo, and Theo actually learns how to do everything by using YouTube.
Yeah.
So he rebuilt a property by learning on YouTube. If he wanted to do anything, he just went on YouTube. Yeah. And he lives his life dependent upon learning those skills, whatever they may be, on YouTube.
That's amazing. But on the flip side, wouldn't it be good if he had a person that was sort of offering that information and that support and what you were talking about earlier with mentoring? So I think his mentor's YouTube.
Yeah, I think getting that balance right over those things is absolutely critical.
Yeah, definitely.
We need to recognise that we live in a global community.
Yeah, more so than ever before. I travelled the world when I was 23. And back then, my parents didn't have a clue where I was. Now you could track their location. They had to wait to me to get to an internet cafe to be able to communicate anything that we'd done. You know, photographs they might get once a month if they were lucky, if we had enough internet time to upload them in the internet cafe. I had about 3 near-death experiences when I was travelling, and you just try and hide them. I remember Mum panicking because we were in Peru and there was a military coup at the time. So we were told to get out of the country. She was panicking because obviously all the newsreels that were coming through to this country made it look horrendous. But in actual fact, our exit from the country was really easy. Yes, they had barricades and they had fires set up and things, but the tourist buses would literally stop one side of the barricade. They'd let everybody out. You'd walk through. They'd just let you walk through, no problems whatsoever. Get on another bus and off you go. So to me, I was absolutely fine, but she had no knowledge at all. But these days, if one of my children was to decide to go travelling, you'd know exactly where they were. You'd have instant communication. It's a completely different world that we live in.
It's interesting because at the moment, and it is interesting for me, and it sounds so entitled and privileged, and it is entitled and privileged, is that my daughter lives in Tasmania, and her daughter, who's called Erin, who is 16, has just gone on a school trip to China.
Amazing.
I mean, so at the moment, she's kind of got some messages, but she's heavily censored in terms of how she can use, so she can't use WhatsApp or anything else like that.
Because it's a school organised
event? No, not because it's school,
no.
Because they're in China.
Oh, because they're in China, yeah.
And they had to apply for a visa. They had to fill in a mountain of forms in order to get into China.
Yeah, we did a month in China.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing place.
Well, she's going to somewhere I've never been. I grew up and spent a lot of my childhood in Hong Kong.
Okay.
But I hadn't actually ever been to China, but I exist like most people in the Western world with all those prejudices about China, what it is and what it isn't, without really recognizing as a world force they are going to be so significant in the future.
Yeah, 100%. We were in Xi'an and we met this girl who was English speaking, which was really unusual. And I think you almost go through life as somebody that lives in England, assuming everybody can speak English. It's lazy, isn't it? But, you know,
It's like most Brits abroad shout
yes,
or speak very slowly.
We were in a train station just trying to buy a train ticket. Obviously couldn't speak the language and we were trying to queue, but they don't queue. So, of course, we didn't grasp this and we were just stood there for hours. And this young girl really came along and scooped us up because she spoke English and she wanted to practice her English. And she took us out for the whole day, all around these different places that we would never have had access to or seen otherwise. And she was amazing. And even then, so crikey, 20 years ago, she was really ahead of her time and she was wanting to embrace different cultures. And she had so many questions for us about Western culture or about how we did things. So both sides of it got something out of the experience.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place.
I was actually in the back of a taxi in Indonesia trying to find a particular restaurant.
Right.
And I thought, and this goes back a few years before we even had smartphones or before they were even available.
Yeah.
And one of the guys I was with was convinced he could fix it. So he stopped the taxi and he jumped out and he was running up to people in the streets. And I said, the chances of you finding somebody here who's going to speak English or understand a single word that you're saying are zero. And it proved to be the case because he didn't come back with any sort of intelligent answer at all. Although, by a sheer fluke, we actually found the restaurant.
Oh, well done.
But it was a fluke. It was not because of our actually accessing somebody to be able to speak English. I think the arrogance of the Brits abroad is appalling.
It is incredible. And I think that's why travelling for me at a relatively young age was a fantastic experience because it opens your eyes up to so much about the world that you're probably shielded as in living in England and having the upbringing. I think actually
what's interesting, and it is interesting, is, and I hear it being spoken about all the time on television, people talk about this culture and that culture and actually have no idea understanding what culture is and how it actually works, the rituals, the traditions, all the things that go to make their particular way of life.
Yeah, it is fascinating. So we were in Bolivia. We'd just crossed the border from Brazil into Bolivia. So we managed to stamp out of Brazil but couldn't stamp into Bolivia. So had to stay in this border town overnight to get our stamp in the morning to be able to move on. And we were robbed in the evening. Now, what was really interesting about this is, so the police knew who had robbed us. We could identify him relatively well. It's quite a small town. They went and arrested his grandmother and put her into the prison for him to come forward. And that was the way that they operated. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's this poor old lady and she hasn't done anything wrong. But she's in prison awaiting him, holding himself.
Talk about peer group pressure.
I know. I was like, wow, can you imagine if we operated like that in this country? But that's the way they did it. And sure enough, he went and handed himself in because he didn't want his grandmother to be in a jail cell.
Did you get your stuff back?
No, we didn't. Well, very, very strange situation because really small town situation. So he's in what looks like a stable, like leaning over a stable door, while we're having to identify him in front of his family. So we are sat like this to his family, having to identify him. They get this rucksack, empty it out on a table. There's cameras, phones, passports, bank cards. So he's obviously does it a lot. None of them were ours. So we got nothing back, but just a very out of body experience. And we had to go to La Paz to get passports back and things like that. And he was on the same train being transported to a larger place to serve his time. It's just a really bizarre experience.
Strange.
Yeah.
So you've now got no passport?
No.
No cards?
No.
What else did you lose?
Mobile phone.
Mobile phone.
Luckily, I knew my dad's mobile phone number off by heart, so I managed to phone him. He, funnily enough, going back to our earlier conversation, had insisted that I gave him power of attorney before I travelled abroad.
Wow.
So he was in a position to replace everything for me other than the passport. You had to go to the British consulate for that, which was fine. But yeah, he managed to get everything. And then luckily we were travelling as a group of 6 and it was 3 of us that lost our belongings. The other 3 didn't. So he was organising money to go into their bank accounts to draw out for us to access that way, and got a replacement mobile phone sent out to meet me in New Zealand with 2 of our friends who hadn't done the South America leg of the trip and were joining us in New Zealand. So he managed to sort it all out by having that power of attorney for me at that point in time. But obviously you never expect it, do you? As a young person, you're not thinking you're going out to get robbed and go through an extremely strange experience.
I think the way your dad stepped up and actually did all of that and actually sorted, it's just incredible.
Yeah, no, he was fantastic, and it took all of the worry out of the situation. Everything was resolved relatively easily for me compared to the 2 other people who had their belongings robbed because they hadn't done that same thing. So, it's the things you don't think about. It's the things you don't consider, isn't it? That end up coming up. But yeah, South America was a very different experience.
I don't think there are many 23-year-olds who are walking around having exceeded or understood about power of attorney.
No. And that was Dad's life lesson to me, I suppose, at the time. He said, I said, why do we need this? Oh, you never know when you're going to need it. It's a good idea just to have it in place, just in case. And sure enough, within the first 3 months of the 12-month trip, it happened.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it was useful.
I don't need to ask you. He was such an influential character in your life.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, I love my dad to pieces. And when you're growing up, and I think especially when you're a teenage girl, you don't necessarily appreciate what somebody is doing for you. And looking back on it now, I definitely appreciate how hard he was working. But over and above that, what he was trying to do with us by supporting, my brother was a cub, so he was the cub leader. There was no play school at the time, so my mum set one up. It's things like that they did when we were children that at the time you take it for granted, or you think it's normal. You think that's what every family does. But actually, they are helping you, they're guiding you the whole time. And yeah, he's definitely an influential person.
But I'm sure you pick up those values, don't you? You pick up those values and those behaviours, and then you actually use some of those with your own children. You
do, yes. Yeah, now, and I try and educate my children on why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Why do I go to the Rotary Club? And they have a view of, you're just going for a meal
it's privilege,
out.
Or you're going for a meal out.
Exactly. Yeah. But so last night, for example, you had 2 people who had just sold properties. So they needed a little bit of guidance on what they needed to do because the tax landscape's changed and you have to do it within 60 days now. You have to report the capital gain. So it's just little things where you can help out, or connecting people for opportunities. The Rotary Club are doing a trip to the Ukraine, taking some aid over, and they needed some access to some vans. Well, there's clients of mine that have vans that might be available. So that's a way that I can facilitate having an impact on a wider scale. And it's relatively little to me in terms of I'm just connecting 2 people together. But what you don't understand is the value of those connections sometimes.
I think the need for it has been emphasised, and I think it's unfortunate that it has the reputation and has developed the way it has. But I think things like Facebook say to me that people want to be connected.
They do. They really do. But they're almost encouraged to sit behind a screen for the connection. So I think the challenge is actually getting people out to have that in-person connection. And I've had a lot of my clients say to me, oh no, I'm networking, that I know it would benefit my business, but I can't do it. Okay, well, come with me. I will meet you in the car park. I will sit with you. I will walk in with you. I will support you through that journey. It doesn't have to be as frightening as it is, But something like that, the value to one of my clients can be immense by the connections they can make in the room and the business that they can do, which then enhances their personal position because they're earning more money, they're able
I
to
think
live
the
more of the life.
in-person networking and so forth is utterly critical.
It is, and it is getting more challenging to get that message across to people in a lot of ways. And I think younger people are maybe don't see the value in it because they can make those connections online or they can meet that person by Zoom. But the reality of it is you're never going to build up that same level of trust or get to know that person as well via a Zoom call because the connection isn't quite there, is it? There's still a bit of a distinct disconnect in doing it through a computer screen. So getting somebody to actually meet another person.
We'd have never done this had we not connected through that network.
No, exactly. So, this hopefully is a really positive thing for you
I hope
and
it
for
is.
me.
I hope it is. And I've enjoyed doing this. I've enjoyed it as part of the conversations that we've created and the connections and the opportunity that it makes. Can I also ask for you to consider for the future, because it's something that what you do, I think the story that you have is extraordinary. And I think most people would know about it. I think you need to commission somebody, and it's not me, but you need to commission somebody to actually write a book or write a summary around all the things that you've done. Because it is a great story to tell. There are so many things that it branches out into.
I've got a diary of my travels.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I journaled every single day because it's things that you forget. It's the little detail. So I suppose a really good example would be we were in Malaysia and we were going to a temple and we got off the bus and this man in all of this clothing kind of dragged us underneath a bridge, myself and my ex-partner. And I want to tell your fortunes. Well, of course you think, he's just after money, isn't he? He doesn't know what he's talking about. So I wrote down everything that he said in the conversation. And he said that I would have a child within 2 years, that I would be married within 4 years. But he said my ex-partner would be married within 7 years. And do you know what? Everything came true.
Wow.
Yeah. And that at the time, I would have told you what a load of poppycock, But because I wrote that down, I was able to reference back to it.
So you'd be great, wouldn't you? Whoever was trying to dialogue or actually collect all this together. Because I think the value of what it is and what people are and their lives and telling that story becomes ever, ever more significant.
I just feel I am quite insignificant compared to a lot of people that I meet. You meet people along the way, they've got fabulous stories. And maybe there's an argument that everybody should write things down.
Get a look in that mirror and recognise you have a fabulous story yourself.
Yeah, I suppose I just don't see it like that. But
no, you don't.
No, that's a personal challenge for me there that you've identified.
Beating you up. All right. Yeah. You have an amazing personal story.
Yeah, I suppose that I've got a lot of life experience. My husband says that for our age, I've done a lot of things, which, I suppose is relatively unusual.
Well, to grow a company from being just you and your dad now into employing 20 people and have a reputation as you have within the community that you're a part of is incredible.
It all goes back to our childhood, though. It's all the life lessons that we've learnt along the way.
But you need to teach people that story.
Yeah, we were both heavily encouraged to travel as well because our grandfather was a surveyor and he was employed by a mining firm that got him to travel around the world, negotiating with tribal people, things like that for land, for them to mine. And he always emphasised, I want you to travel. I want you to experience the world, because a lot of his work was in Asia, South America again, North America, Canada. So he actively encouraged us to go out and experience things. So that was his influence. And my other granddad was in Asia during the Second World War.
Right.
He was on a ship that rescued prisoners of war in Asia. So he wanted his children to see New Zealand and Asia. So all of the grandchildren have been, apart from one, we've all been to New Zealand and we've all gone to Asia because that was what he strongly wanted. But it's fantastic that we were encouraged to have those experiences because not everybody is.
So you could actually collect together all that story, couldn't you?
Yes, yeah. I'm learning more and more about Grandad as I go, because he was quite
Excuse me.
private person. He didn't really speak about his time in the war. So we are still piecing together that information now. Yeah.
Make sure you've got your phone and you record it.
Yes, yeah.
Record the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, he's not with us anymore, so we
Isn't
can't
he?
have the
Okay.
conversation with him. So he was born in 1906. So, yeah. He was 50 when he had my mum. So,
Wow.
yeah, he passed when we were relatively young. And again, because he didn't talk about it. It wasn't the done thing. He didn't talk about it. So, and he didn't live to the generation where it became more of a thing to talk about it. So we're very much piecing together. We didn't find out until his funeral that he'd even been to a prisoner of war camp and rescued people. So there's just something that he didn't say. So
Yeah, it is interesting actually, because although both my parents have died, when I look at life and I listen to the people talking, I quite often kind of have a reference which goes, if my mum was here, I could ask her to explain to me how he fits in, who she is, what she does, and so forth. Because connecting who the family were and all the family members were is still somewhat of a puzzle that I don't have complete at all.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the same for the majority of people, isn't it? We're quite lucky on one side of the family. We've got a family Bible.
Okay.
So it tracks every generation, and that was left to me when my granddad passed, and I'm tasked with the job of keeping it up to date. But of course, as families grow, that gets more challenging to keep it up to date, because my cousins had 5 children, and keeping on track of what they're all doing, etc., is, it's not always easy because they're up in Liverpool. And as much as you try through social media, I think an interesting thing regarding social media with maybe my generation is a lot of people are stopping using it. So they used it when they were younger to the extreme, but now they're more, I want elements of my life to be private. I don't want everything on Facebook.
You don't want it to be public. You don't want to share.
Exactly. So there's definitely a shift in that as well, which again kind of makes that keeping in touch. You have to make more of that effort to do it, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think actually it's a good thing that you don't
I think the
you're up
balance
to
is
date.
really hard, isn't it?
Yes.
Or sustaining that balance is really hard.
Yeah, when everyone's busy and perhaps getting to see each other in person isn't easy, even though the world's very accessible. It's not
I've
always...
learned a really important lesson, which I would share with everybody, was to say, Tom, my son, and his family now live in Sydney.
Yeah, love
And, my connection is so strong. But that was 14 years ago that they left. And since he's been there, one of the things that we insist, or I kind of insisted right from the beginning, we have a FaceTime call every single week.
Yes.
And we talk for a minimum of an hour or so. And I think to myself, did I sit down and talk to my mum and dad for an hour when I was younger every single week? Not necessarily. Not like a FaceTime call where he's talking about what's happened to his children and so forth.
Yeah.
And at the moment, he is actually in Vegas at a Cloud World conference.
Oh, fantastic.
So I've got my son in Vegas and my granddaughter in China.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of go, it is global, isn't it?
It definitely is. And there's definitely benefit that you can learn as well. A lot of the learning that we're getting in our industry actually originates from Australia, because they embraced a lot of the cloud technology
It's interesting,
earlier.
actually. Interesting enough, all this technology around podcasts is actually produced and made in Australia.
Yeah,
The company who make all this equipment are based in Australia.
I can
And
imagine.
I didn't know that until I started looking. But it's been a world, stepping into the world of podcasts and understanding about it has just been utterly, utterly fascinating.
I can imagine it has as well.
And I think the technology and the innovation and all that sort of stuff is incredible.
It is.
To actually add a final bit around the globalization, I was looking to try and find somebody who could edit what it was that we'd done when it was all put together. And I found a guy who's done 15 years experience, is incredibly experienced and worked in all sorts of stuff. The only kind of downside is he's in Bangkok.
Wow, okay.
Right, so we have the time difference to cope with, but his
Yes.
competence is not the issue. And I now realise that living in this global world is about us talking and not necessarily looking to our neighbour's back door or whatever. It could be way outside. It could be anywhere.
There is a lot of opportunity there, and I think that's a fantastic thing for the generations that are coming through, isn't it? That they've got access to a world, literally a world of information. And have you thought about doing something like this about your life to document for your grandchildren?
Yeah, I was actually having that conversation. I was having that conversation with myself the other day and thinking that if I was to do it, I would do it through this medium because I prefer talking than I do just sitting down and writing.
Yes. So you need to speak to one of the guys at networking. Part of what they offer, so if you take a will through them, is they offer this online storage platform where you can upload videos, you can photographs with explanations, anything that you want to pass down. And of course, it's stored there then forever, for every generation to come.
I mean, I would suggest, to bounce it back to you as well, Emma, that people would learn so much more about you just by watching what it is that you've contributed to this.
Yes, well, hopefully that's the idea.
No, I think they will. I think they will. And the insight about you as a person. I'm not dealing with your accountancy firm. No. I'm dealing with Emma, a person.
Yes. And that is incredibly important because people buy from people ultimately, don't they? And that's where a lot of business owners don't take that into account, and they're very faceless. And I think that's a challenge for them, or it will become more and more of a challenge for them as tech advances, and what they do can potentially be replaced by something else.
It's quite interesting, actually. It's also quite interesting because having spent time travelling, and I've travelled extensively as well, and been very fortunate because of it, and I really view myself as being privileged and very fortunate. Yeah. I know not everybody has that opportunity, and I've had that opportunity. And having travelled and been around the world in all sorts of ways and spent time in lots of different industries dealing with customer service. One of the things that we used to talk about with such passion was the bringing back and the importance of personal service that people gave.
Yes.
People make the difference.
Yeah, and that's what we try and do, and we're moving towards a system which Will, our mentor, advocates, which is a pod system where there's 4 people that work with a client and they know who those people are. They are their people, so they get to know them in depth and work with them. So as we grow, they're not dealing with a different person every year who doesn't know anything about their business. And so it's to try and get that client relationship. It's
interesting, actually, because I've had 2 previous guests, and the relationship is so important.
Yes.
Those small, effective units become the way that you access those connections.
Yeah.
So we talked to somebody who used to be in the Royal Marines, and they talk about having a group of 4 people.
Yes.
So they have somebody who leads the group, and they have 3 others who are part of that. That's the most effective fighting unit that they can come up with. Talk to somebody else who's a policeman, who used to be a policeman. They talk about it. They created teams of 6. So they're breaking all that down and realizing that if we break down what we've got, we actually, and I think in a way there's a message about creating almost like a self-sustainable group who are forced during work time to meet together at certain times and help and support each other.
Yes, and that's the idea of it, is that support network is there. And internally as well, it's beneficial because they've got their own system of support as well. They look after each other well in the groups of 4. That's the idea of it.
I don't want to be too sort of girly about it, but, and I say I'm going to be accused of being sexist, but almost by having those meetings, the conversations that they'll have is saying, oh, I found somebody great who could do your nails for you or whatever else it may do. We need to have those connections, but they don't normally happen in casual conversations, although I've learnt more from women in my life than I've ever learnt from men, because I think women have that ability to connect at an emotional level which most men don't.
I think it's just building relationships in a different way, potentially, isn't it? And I think when they're young, we've said a few times, oh, girls, because when they're young, if they have a grudge with somebody, they can hold it for years.
Yeah, I know.
Whereas a boy might, have a fight and then they move past it and it's gone.
When I was teaching, if I ever had a fight going on and I had to sort it out, if I had a fight between two boys, I'd have two people in my room, and then
Yes.
I would deal with it in my room. So if I had a fight between two girls, I'd have one girl would arrive to begin with, and then there would be 60 girls in the room.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And but maybe those earlier experiences then build different relationships in the future.
They do.
Yeah. And that's what it's building. It's hard to remember that when you're parenting it, though.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, for me, I actually lived a very closeted existence because I went to boarding school. Girls were a complete mystery to me.
Did you enjoy boarding school?
At times, I loved elements about it. And at times, being homesick and crying and feeling, it's painful. It can be very painful. And also, it's far. I actually had a big debate with myself. Would I ever send my own kids to boarding school? And the answer was no.
No.
Because I will do a better job of being a parent than any teacher is capable of doing. Because they're my kids. But also, they're my responsibility.
Well, you have that emotional investment in them as well, don't you, for their well-being? Whereas for a teacher, you can't possibly do that for every single child, can you? It's not.
And when you do, and when you get invested, it really becomes quite dangerous.
Yes, it's difficult because you're blurring those professional and
Sure.
personal
I mean,
boundaries.
I used to run a unit for disruptive kids. So I used to develop incredibly strong personal relationships with the kids, and to sometimes breaking that and creating that dependency in that relationship was really, really hard.
Yeah, that's the challenge my husband has as well when he's done a befriending role and it's only intended to last 4 months, for example. And then at the end of it, he has to break the connection. And quite often what happens is those children start to play up again.
Yeah.
Because effectively they're just trying to get him back. into their lives. So a lot of the time they then have to take a decision about whether it is him that goes back or they send somebody else to try and not make them too dependent. But that's hard.
Well, I think if we extend the conversation then and look at what we talked about before, the idea of creating mentors or having mentors in the community, I actually pointed out, and I'm going to try and make that connection myself. For example, that in Exmouth, it's got a huge, and I don't mean huge, it's enormous, gargantuan secondary school.
Yes.
It used to be the biggest secondary school in numbers of pupil in the whole of the UK. What I would propose for the future, and I think there are all sorts of issues given the society that we now live in about safeguarding issues, but creating mentor relationships between some of the children and also the adults within the community.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people actually need a lot of help and a lot of support. And I was interested that a lot of people recognise now that they actually had mentors when they were younger. But they didn't call them mentors, but they viewed them in that way. And often they were grandparents or they were older generation people who they listened to, took advice from and went to if they were in difficulty of some sort.
Yeah, we're offering a mentorship program at the moment. So the Rotary every year do an apprentice challenge. And they give a team of young people £50 to develop a business idea from scratch. And they can get, at the end of it, a local award, but also a national award. If they win locally, they go to the national level. And we've offered to mentor some teams of young people. If they've got a business idea, if they want to come in, have a chat with us, support them through it. And hopefully that becomes more of a long-term relationship as well, because they do their challenge, but perhaps they then want to take that further, or they want to stay in touch with us to help them in the future for whatever their career path is.
I think one of the big ways that they can do that is build a bridge based around their ability to understand technology.
Yes.
So, for example, you'll go and you'll talk to people and they'll say, well, no, it's okay. My son set that up for me, or somebody else. And you'll talk to somebody who's older and they don't understand how the technology actually works. I quite often feel very, very frustrated watching older people trying to cope with their phone.
Yes. I can remember with my granddad when my nan passed on, like, unexpectedly. He had a mobile phone and we had to put all the, you press 1 for Emma, you press 2 for Jamie type thing. But he had to have a full instruction card that he kept in his pocket to even be able to do the press 1 for Emma thing. there's a lot of education that could be done there and support given for them to be able to understand the technology, definitely.
I remember actually, and if I go back, and part of the problem is the communication that goes with it. So I can remember when I was when I was working with some people and learning about computers and how they actually work, people go, oh, it's easy. And they go, and I'd have no idea what they were doing or how they did it.
Yeah, you need a step by step sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I think one of the ways we need to do is to find some avenues of getting those people connected. And we're back on mentoring again.
Yes.
I didn't finish from the last part of the episode about telling you the piece about the sex education and menopause in school, but I do want to tie all the things together, bizarrely, as my brain works. But let's just take a break and we'll come back and do that, okay?
Okay.